Hallo.
Maar het bijzondere is dat in Duitsland nadat de Duitsers keizers uit Oostenrijk certificaat als eerste keer, dus een verzegelde, heeft de raad een Joodse wet uitgevoerd een aantal jaren toch aan de prijs ongelooflijk gezeten op de vinger. Zo'n heel bijzonder wat is de betere taal te bedenken als ja, de Duitsers in het geval.
So because they're going after their dreams or they're going after they don't listen to people. They're just, you know, believing that I believe I can do that. You know, people who I think who achieve a lot, they didn't listen to people. They just were focused, you know, on what they
Yeah, you always see what happened now.
And now it's the finish.
Yeah, what?
Why not? I have to gonna do something with this one acoustic song.
Yeah, I don't know when. I'm telling the last to do this and acoustic even. Music, ja, dat is goed. Ja, acoustic, yes, like an even.
Acoustic guitar, you know. Ja, goed.
Alleen hier. Zo, alleen daar ben je, ja? Daar ben je, ja, maar dat is persoonlijk voor. Alleen het is jammer dat mensen dat niet. Zeg maar, mij elke dag. Elke dag.
Lekker alle twee.
Ja, omdat ze niet goede zeil hebben gezet.
Ja.
Ze hadden deze moeten zetten, die oranje hadden ze moeten kopen. Daar heb je de betere dekken. Maar ja, morgen is het mooi weer.
Jullie moeten mij zo roepen.
Nee, maar morgen hebben we zo mooi weer.
Ik ben specialist.
Oh jee.
Hey, specialist met de tong. Hallo.
Ja?
Mag ik zomaar filmen?
Excuse me?
Privacy.
For the privacy, don't worry. I have to ask you.
I have no passport.
Uh-huh.
That's why.
Okay. Helemaal, helemaal.
Thank you, little Chris. Vito Aponki, trademarks.
This is a brush. This is whatever.
Thank you, little Marina. Chapter 3, Anger and Danger. Chapter 3 is Anger and Danger. Instant fury, reckless art, stupid bets, cruelty for the other and for oneself. Performance is going beyond the limits, beyond the fear. Performance is breaking the bands. Marina Abramovic, freeing the voice. Thank you, little Yuri. Paul McCartney, whipping a wall and a window with paint. Thank you, little Marina. Tito Apoki, blindfold catching. Thank you, little Gina, and thank you, little.
Is identical or something with other people that also transgress. I don't mean, of course, that they are in some other world, but I refer to the infinity.
Yeah, but
I thought you were talking about people being identical or not being identical.
yeah, but when I of course I have problems with this concept of identity, but maybe there's a kind of formalism that why I spoke about this universality, and in a formal way, as a philosopher, you can you don't make in a way empirical studies like in other sciences, for example, but it's much more about the question, not what's the difference between this guy and this guy, and it's their singularity and their way of living. It's not a sociologist question or a sociologist, but it's much more the question: what is the condition of the human being as such? They have in common that they have in common that they participate to this empty form that is the space of non-definition, of not being totally, while being codified by all these established structures, there's still this this emptiness in the very heart of this meaning universal that has to be asserted and affirmed, and I think the philosophical definition of the human condition has much more to do with this, to connect the subject with this space of infinitude, like I called it today, or incommensurability, than to define it through established moments and aspects of.
Het moet er niet meer uit zien vandaag te tekenen. Dat die goed? Je gaat het ook dus. I'll go to court please. Oh, deze is gewoon slecht in elkaar gezet. Blame it on the bookings. Sound of belief. If you really love me. Baby, yes I do. Hey! Michael, Michael!
She's the girl, I am the one. You can't pick up my car.
You look like Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson.
Hello? Is it me you're looking for? I can see it in your eyes. Ah! Ik heb het nu. Ah!
Beetje hard zeggen.
Ja, precies. Ja.
Nee, het ding is toch.
Vervloekt zij hij bij dag en vervloekt zij hij bij nacht. Vervloekt zij hij als hij gaat slapen en vervloekt zij hij als hij opstaat. Vervloekt zij hij als hij uitgaat en vervloekt zij hij als hij binnenkomt.
Ik, Spinoza, de verdoemde. Ik spreek tot jullie. Vervloekt ben ik bij dag en vervloekt ben ik bij nacht. Laat niemand met mij verkeren.
Vervloekt ben jij Spinoza, steeds als je wakker wordt, steeds als je gaat slapen, als je spreekt, als je ademt, als je eet. Laat geen mens met jou meegaan op jouw weg. Laat niemand met jou dwalen. Vervloekt ben jij, verdoemde, die de dwaling tot waarheid maken wil. Jij dwalende, die alleen maar zijn kennis vertrouwt. Die het geloof tegen zijn waarheid inruilt. Die de gemeenschap veracht. Die de wetten schenst.
Ik, de verdoemde, die jullie geloven toestelt. De gemeenschap en haar wetten. Ik, Spinoza, ik spreek tot jullie. Vervloekt ben ik bij dag en vervloekt ben ik bij nacht. Als ik eet, als ik adem, als ik preek, wil ik vasthouden aan een waarheid die geen geloof omvat. Geen gemeenschap erkent en geen wet volgt. Een waarheid die van iedereen is. waarheid die niemand vergeet.
Aan de herinnering ontrukt zul je vergeten zijn, van je toekomst beroofd.
Ze zeggen dat de komedie aan het lachen maakt. Wie valt, struikelt niet. Wie dwaalt, doet het voor iedereen. Wie op sterven ligt, geeft troost. De dood is van papier. Niets wat het lijkt. Niets als zonder uitvlucht. Alles gebeurt om te gebeuren. Niets gebeurt er, niets zal zijn gebeurd.
We noemen comedy het betuigen van de onverschilligheid van de wereldtoneel. God is een indifferentie van God. Doelloos zijn spel. Figuur in het spel de mens. Modus, speelgoed, uitgespeeld. Niet gaaf, niet ongaaf, is zijn wereld.
En de waardigheid van de filosofie. Het atheïsme van het christendom maakt er een geloofwaardig godsdienst van.
God is onbewust. Ik geloof in God.
Van God vindt het goed dat hij niet bestaat.
Met instemming van de gezegende God en van deze hele heilige gemeenschap, ten overstaan van de heilige boeken van de Torah en de 613 voorschriften die zo daarin staan geschreven, spreken wij de banvloek over hem uit, waarmee Josua Jericho vervloekte, met de verwensingen waarmee Elisa de kwade knapen verwenste en met alle vervloekingen die in de wet afgekondigd zijn. Mogen de Heer hem nooit vergeven en mogen voortaan de toorn van de Heer en de ijver van God over deze mens komen en hem beladen met alle vloeken die staan geschreven in dit boek der wet. En de Heer zal zijn naam onder de hemel uitwissen en de Heer zal hem tot zijn verderf scheiden van alle stammen Israël, stoten met verwensingen van het firmament, geschreven in dit boek der wet. En u allen die verbonden zijn met u, God de Heer, blijft wij behouden.
Alleen een God zonder wil is rechtvaardig voor de mens, die niets hoeft te willen dan te leven naar zijn natuur. Naar de reden die hem de wereld lijkt ontvangen zoals die is.
Het is best onrechtvaardig. Dat de een honger en de ander niet. Het geeft de een rijkdom en de ander ook zijn kinderen af. Ligt deze niet het ja zeggen? Ze moeten ontvangen om de reden.
Er is alleen maar deze wereld. Als je nee zegt tegen deze wereld, zeg je nee tegen jezelf. Jij bent van deze wereld. De wereld is niet van jou. Voordat je de wereld kunt willen veranderen, moet je je wil bevrijden. Aan iedere wil gaat het ja.
Hey, Moses. Moses. Moses, stop. How to go on bike?
Maar dit gaat nog wel even voor. Dit gaat niet aan ook hoor.
Yes, okay, let's start with this lecture. This is the 9th lecture at the Bijlmer Spinoza Festival, and the title of this lecture is The Friendship Between Philosophy and Art. And as I tried yesterday to give a definition of art, I decided today to structure this lecture by 3 questions. The first question is, what is art? The second question is, what is philosophy? The third question is, what is the friendship between philosophy and art? And the definition of art that I want to propose today is, first definition, art only exists as assertion or affirmation of form. The second definition that I want to propose is, art only exists as confrontation of the here.
Hey, can you hear me now? Becky.
Yeah, better, okay. Okay, let's restart. No, it's okay. Let's restart. The title is The Friendship Between Philosophy and Art, and I want to give to answer 3 questions today. And the first question is, what is art? The second question is, what is philosophy? And the third question is, what is the friendship between philosophy and art? The first definition of art that I want to propose today is, art only exists as assertion or affirmation of form. The second definition of art is, art only exists as confrontation of the here and now. That means as confrontation of the established reality, the field of established realities. That means that what I call texture of facts. That means this hyper-codified, socially, politically, economically hyper-codified texture of established facts. So art is a confrontation of the here and now as confrontation of this universe of the facts, of this one and single reality. There's only one is reality, hyper-complex reality. There's no second world. There's no second reality behind this reality. There's no beyond in the way. But there's this universe of facts, and of course, art has to articulate itself in this universe of established facts. That means by confrontation of the here and now of its own conditional field, if you want. The third definition of art that I want to present is art is the experience of the inconsistency precisely of this field. That means of the inconsistency of this consistency universe, that is the universe of the facts. That means the so-called reality as supposed to be consistent. And art has, of course, to do as articulating itself in the here and now of the established reality order. It has to confront it by getting in touch with the inconsistency point of this consistency universe that is our world or our reality. So I repeat, the first definition was art is assertion or affirmation of form in this field of established realities. The second is confrontation of the here and now, confrontation of the established reality order by the third definition, by making the experience, by touching the inconsistency point of this order, or if you want, by touching the blind spot of this visibility zone, which we call reality, or that is in a way also the space of information, the space of communication, the space we share is the space of we live in. Everything in this space, our hopes, our evidences, our opinions, our certainties are circulating and giving us the impression that that there's a kind of consistency concerning this field. The fourth definition of art that I want to present is art is opening towards the impossible. So this visibility zone or this reality field is, of course, a kind of optional texture. It's a texture in which every day we find ourselves in the situation to make choices, to make decisions in this field, and I think art is, of course, a transgression of this universe of options, of this universe of alternatives, of this universe of established evidences, or of this universe of possibilities, to finally get in touch with impossibility as such. So in art, in art you always are dealing with your own incapacities, and if you would simply do what you are able to do, if you would simply choose between choices, already given choices, it wouldn't be art, I think. So art is the opening towards the impossible. That means the opening towards the inconsistency of myself as the subject of art, as the artist, as the one who makes art. The fifth definition that I want to propose is art is self-acceleration towards the unknowable. I believe in this, that art doesn't come out of knowledge, out of something I already knew. It's not such a procedure like developing knowledge out of knowledge. But art is much more touching this space of the unknowable. Like I said, the opening towards the impossibility of myself as a subject, as the subject of production, as the subject of art, as the subject of creation. The sixth definition that I want to propose is art is the affirmation of the incommensurability. What I call incommensurability is precisely another word for incommensurability, or for the domain or the dimension of incommensurability would be truth. Truth is not, you have to make the difference between certainties and truth. And I think certainties makes part of this reality field, but the truth is the name for the very inconsistency of this field. So a truth, the dimension of the truth is not a dimension that positively exists. It's not, like I said, a second world, a higher world, like the world of truth. truth is precisely the name for the non-existing of a second order, of a second world, of a second reality. So what I call truth is simply the inconsistency of our certainties, or of the universe of our certainties, so of the so-called reality. So that was the sixth definition of art. Art is affirmation of the incommensurability. That means art is affirmation of truth in that sense. So what is philosophy? The first definition of philosophy is assertion of truth. You remember the first definition I gave concerning art is affirmation of form. I think, of course, art is affirmation of truth, like it's affirmation of incommensurability, like I said in the sixth definition. And philosophy, of course, is also dealing with form, because each philosopher is inventing its own form, its own language, its own kind of writing, and of course, philosophy is sharing this with art, that it has to deal with a form of thinking, a form of self-presentation by language, and but in the same degree, it's assertion of truth. It's affirmation of truth. That means affirmation of this inconsistency that I call truth. As such, that is the second definition. As such, philosophy only exists as transgression of knowledge. So, like I said, it's not so much about knowledge, and philosophy is not so much a kind of academic procedure. You know, of course, you can study philosophy at the university, like you can study different sciences or whatever, or history or whatever, or history of art, and that's a normal procedure. You go to the university, you study the thinking of other thinkers, of other philosophers, and finally you write a book about the thinking of someone else. And of course, this is not philosophy, that's more about making history of philosophy. And I think it's important that we have this kind of academic work. But philosophy, of course, is something totally different than this. Philosophy has to do with developing and insisting on our own philosophical position, inventing an own thought, an own philosophical position. And so I would say philosophy has much more than being an academic procedure, much more than, so I would say philosophy is never philosophy about something, but it's philosophy for something. That means for something new, by inventing a new philosophical position, by touching this order of incommensurability that I call the order of truth. So it's transgression of knowledge, and it's in that sense also the fight for the impossible, because this order of truth is, of course, the dimension of the impossible. The fourth definition that I want to present concerning philosophy is the fight against narcissistic hypersensitivism and self-victimization. Why? Because philosophy as transgression of this knowledge system, philosophy as transgression of this reality system, of the texture of facts, has, of course, to avoid the self-reduction of the thinking subject, of the subject of philosophy, of the subject of thinking, to this field, to this already defined field of knowledge, of evidences and opinions and so on. So it has to avoid the self-reduction. That means it has to avoid this this narcissistic, always narcissistic self-victimization by reducing itself to this field and denying its own subject status by insisting on a fact or not being nothing but an object, nothing but a result of this field. You know that structuralism in the philosophy of the second half of the philosophy of the 20th century, you can find this idea that that something like a subject, the human being as subject, does not exist, because it is nothing but the object of this kind of anonymous field or structure that is the established order, the established system of established values, established structures, established wisdom, established knowledge, and so on. And I think, of course, it's very important to confront this. So making this kind of historical work as a philosopher, but at the same time, of course, it's insisting on the necessity of this category of a subject. So there remains a subject after the death of the subject, after this after the deconstruction of the subject, if you want. And this subject is, of course, a subject that has first to confront its own object status, its own status as a factual result of this texture, but then in a second gesture by opening up to itself as in its possible subject status. That means as itself as a kind of figure of resistance towards this field of objective unfreedom that is in fact reality. So that was the fourth definition of philosophy. Philosophy has to avoid this kind of self-reduction and self-victimization. The fifth definition that I want to give is philosophy is affirmation of contingency. What's contingency? Hasard, the French word, Zufall in German. Contingency is simply the order of tomorrow, or the order of the next, of the future. The future, the space is the space of contingency. I don't know if I will still be alive tomorrow, but I have to continue living the present, my presence. And that means affirmation of contingency means, of course, to define myself as a subject, not by my identity in this already institutionalized field of established knowledge or information or communication, but to insist on myself as a subject, defining myself more through this in relation to the future. That means in relation to something that I don't control, that I don't know about the future, but I define myself more in contact to that dimension of the future. That would be the only progressive, I would say, concept of thinking and philosophy and self-identification, if you want. I identify myself not with my object status in the past, or not with my historical being, not with my status or as a product of history and so on, but I identify myself. I affirm myself as a subject in relation to the space of contingency. That means in relation to the space of future. The sixth definition of philosophy that I want to propose is now easy to understand. Philosophy is the suspension of facts. I think philosophy is not dealing with facts, because facts are nothing but facts. And if you have, there's a very beautiful text of Ludwig Wittgenstein, this Austrian philosopher, that's not so well known. Everyone read the Tractatus or the philosophical investigations, but there's this lecture on ethics that was published in 29, on hold in 28, I think, if I remember well, and there's one passage of this text, and very beautiful, so I recommend you to read this text, and then Wittgenstein once, he says, yeah, but these are facts, these are nothing but facts, and that's very beautiful, I think, because it's, I can't trace the context now, but the thing is, that of course, philosophy, we are not journalists, we are philosophers. What does it mean? Journalists are dealing with facts, but I really believe in the necessity to make a very severe distinction between journalism and philosophy, and journalism and art, of course. And I remember that also that Heiner Müller, this this German, writer, once wrote about this difference by insisting on this distinction, by saying, for example, yeah, journalists have always to be against what they are writing, but as a writer or as an artist, you have to affirm. Einverstanden sein in German. And einverstanden sein, to affirm, doesn't mean simply to accept or to agree with. It's not a question to agree with reality like it is, of course not. But first you have to risk this kind of Nietzschean affirmation, the saying yes, this hyperbolic yes, concerning the incommensurability status of reality. And that's what I would call suspension of facts in this gesture of opening up to these incommensurable parts of this established field. And of course, the next definition of philosophy is kind of excess of the past. Now you understand excess of the past, excess, this dynamics of transgression, going beyond the past, going beyond the present in a way by opening up to this kind of to the space of contingency, that is the space of the uncontrollable. And the last definition of philosophy that I want to present today is philosophy is affirmation of freedom. Here we find ourselves in a Spinoza space at the Spinoza Festival, and you know that Spinoza is a philosopher before Nietzsche who denies, and before neurophysiology, who denies the free will. And but to deny the free will, to deny that something like a free will exists, does not necessarily mean to deny freedom as such. And and of course Spinoza is the philosopher of freedom, one of the philosophers of freedom, and I believe in philosophy as the courage, still after the deconstruction of these concepts like freedom, like justice, like truth, to insist on the necessity, opening up by thinking to this, still affirming the necessity of these concepts. Of course, there is no one-to-one justice in our world. There is no freedom like an object in the world. Freedom has no 100% representation in this reality field. Truth has not. These are empty concepts, oversized concepts if you want. But this is precisely philosophy, to deal with this oversized concepts, with these empty entities, if you want, while insisting on the necessity of this concept. And that's why I would say philosophy is an affirmation of freedom, not of the free will, and it's an affirmation without a proof, without alibi. So philosophy only exists with empty hands, if you want. The subject of philosophy is in a way a naked subject, because it has nothing in its hand. It's not a science philosophy. You can't prove your claims, your philosophical claims, but you have to insist on them, and that's why I would call it a philosophy of assertion, always kind of over-hasty assertion, over-hasty affirmation, for example, of truth. So what is friendship between philosophy and art? So I think both philosophy and art are more in assertion and affirmation than in information and communication. Art and philosophy, they share the desire for the impossible and the new that emerges in this field of objective unfreedom that has to be so to invent a new artwork, for example, or to invent a new thinking means, of course, to invent something new, something impossible in a way, something something nameless in a way, and the philosophical work shares with the artistic work, with the artistic production, this affirmation of something new, this production of something new, and this invention of something new, and so philosophy has much more to do with affirmation than with communication or with information. It shares with art the desire for the impossible and the desire for the new in that sense. Both philosophy and art have to do with the experience of the real or of the truth. The real is I'm using this term of the real in the Lacanian sense, in the sense of like it is used in Jacques Lacan, in this thinking of this French psychoanalyst of the 20th century. And the real is not the reality, the real is simply the inconsistency point of the reality field or of the symbolic order. That means that's what I call truth. So both art and philosophy share this experience of the real or the truth by confronting, of course, the reality, that means this established field of the here and now. And both art and philosophy insist on the necessity to avoid the self-affirmation, the self-assimilation of the thinking subject or of the subject as such to the order of facts, that means to the order of objects, that means to the order of established or officialized reality. And the last thing that they share, I think, is together they resist first to the dictatorship of the facts. They resist together. The art and philosophy resist to the ideology of opinions. Together they resist to the weakness of culture, of simple culture, established culture, and together they resist, of course, to the stupidity of power, of established power, and by insisting on the possibility to be free in this